I came home late and stood in my own foyer feeling like a trespasser. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that has an attitude. The grandfather clock Sabrina insisted on buying clicked away like it was keeping score. She pulled in a few. Minutes later, hair perfect, perfume new, smile rehearsed. "Client dinner ran long," she said, already heading for the stairs. In 5 years of marriage, she had never skipped her post-dinner shower. That night, she did. On the kitchen island, she'd left a neat little still life, a stack of receipts pinned by her spare key and her phone, face down. When I tapped the screen, a preview slid across before the lock swallowed it. "Tonight was perfect," wink emoji. I put the phone back where it was and stood there with a cup of coffee that suddenly tasted like regret. In bed, she slept hard and easy while I stared at the ceiling and tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Saturday, I offered to clean her car like I used to when we were dating. Back then, I'd detail her beat-up Civic while she sat on the hood and told me what she wanted from life. The new Lexus looked showroom fresh, too clean, like someone had scrubbed away the evidence of living. Under the passenger seat, my hand closed on a tube that didn't belong in a glove box. Half used. Expensive. The kind of product we hadn't needed in months because she'd been tired and stressed and working late. Tucked beside. It was a parking stub from the Lantern Hotel 2 towns over, dated 3 nights earlier, the same night she said a client dinner dragged on. I took photos. The tube. The date on the stub. The dash clock and odometer. Not because I wanted to be a detective, but because I suddenly needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. On Tuesday, I met a private investigator in a diner that hadn't been updated since the 70s. His name was Tomas. He didn't look like the movies. He looked like someone's uncle who knew where the bodies were buried because he'd drawn the maps. "Tell me why you think she's stepping out," he said. I slid him the pictures and a list I'd made of every late night, every client dinner, every weekend trip that didn't match our calendar. I told him about Reed Carter, her new business partner who had recently started living rent-free in our conversations. Reed suggests. Reed says. Reed knows a guy. "What's your goal?" Thomas asked. "Confirmation or a case?" "Truth," I said. "I need to know for sure." 2 nights later, at 1 in the morning, Thomas texted, "Photos ready? Check email." The files showed Sabrina and Reed at the Lantern's rooftop bar. Not colleagues. A couple. Her hand on his chest. His hand on her waist. A video of them walking into the hotel together. I closed the laptop and listened to the house breathe. No anger. Just relief so deep it felt like oxygen. I wasn't crazy. I was married to someone who'd moved on and forgotten to tell me. The next day, Thomas called while I was eating a sandwich in my car. "We need to talk, but not on the phone," he said. "There's more than the affair." Back at the diner, he laid out documents the way dealers spread cards. Transfers out of our joint accounts. Beneficiaries changed. My signature copied on forms I hadn't seen. Notes about the bakery I'd invested in last year. "To diversify our future," Sabrina had said. "Now on the block to be sold without me." Reed's name appeared again and again, not just in photos but in notes and call logs. "They've been planning the financial side for months," Tomas said, "before the romance." My hands shook for a second, then went still. It wasn't only my marriage she'd stepped out on. It was our life. I drove home in a calm that felt like ice, water. In the garage, I stared at the pegboard with the neatly hung tools and holiday lights and thought about boundaries. Then I did something I won't defend. I found the tube I'd photographed. I emptied it. I refilled it with something that can bond metal to stone and put it back under the seat. I didn't write a manifesto. I didn't make a speech. I just set the chessboard and waited. The next morning, I was bizarrely polite. I made breakfast. I fixed the porch light. I texted my brother about grabbing a beer. I called a divorce attorney named Mira and asked what it would take to freeze accounts. If I could document misconduct and fraud. Evidence, she said. Bring me evidence. That night, Sabrina dressed like a magazine page and left for another client dinner. "Don't wait up," she said to the air near my cheek. I watched her taillights fade and sat on the couch, with a beer that went warm in my hand. I didn't check my phone. I didn't pace. The grandfather clock counted the seconds. Close to midnight, her car rolled in. I heard 2 sets of steps. "Just for a minute," she said to someone. "He's probably asleep." The bedroom light snapped on. A scream tore the house open, then another, then a third, the kind of sound that lives in bones. My neighbor's porch lights popped on, one by one like stage cues. "Should I call someone?" Mrs. Patel called from across the street. "I think something's wrong," I answered, which was true. The ambulance arrived fast. So did a cruiser. Sabrina and Reed shuffled into the foyer tangled in a throw blanket, faces white with panic and pain. The EMTs didn't smile, but their eyes did. Neighbors filmed with their phones because that's what neighborhoods do now. Somebody whispered, "Isn't that her business partner?" Nobody asked me. My expression said I was just learning everything in real time. At the hospital, I met Mira, the attorney, in the fluorescent purgatory of the waiting room. I'd called her as the ambulance pulled away. She had a folder under her arm, thick with printouts. Photos from Thomas, bank statements, copies of forms, with my forged signature, a proposed separation agreement, and drafts for emergency orders to freeze assets. A nurse told me my wife had been separated and treated for chemical burns. She suggested I give it a minute. When I walked into room 314, Sabrina looked small and human in a way she hadn't in months. No perfect hair, no perfect answers. She started with the oldest line in the book. "It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, setting the folder on her tray. "This is our settlement. Sign, and you keep your salary and your car. Fight, and all of this goes to court with the rest." "You wouldn't," she said. But there was no conviction behind it. "Sabrina," I said quietly, "I already did." I mentioned Reed's wife. She stopped talking. She signed with a trembling hand. I walked out and left the door open for the nurse. By noon the next day, our suburb's rumor mill had reached a full sprint. Reed was on leave, pending an internal review. Sabrina's firm posted a statement about employee conduct. The official story that made it into reports and emails was that a personal product had been contaminated, cause unknown. Lawyers arranged settlements no one would ever talk about. Nothing in those documents mentioned the late-night photos, the audio Thomas handed me of Reed coaching Sabrina on how to move money without triggering alerts, or the drafts Mira filed that froze. Everything they'd tried to shift, those were ours. I boxed Sabrina's things and stacked the cartons in the garage. She came once to get them. We didn't argue. There wasn't anything left to say. My brother brought takeout and groceries, and we ate on the porch steps like we used to in college. He didn't push for details. He didn't need to. Anyone with a phone and an internet connection knew the headline. The part they didn't know was the quiet middle of it, the piece that hurt most. The months of being treated like a bystander in my own life. Work became mercifully simple. I poured myself into my day job and started helping nights at Jimmy's bakery, the one I'd invested in and nearly lost. There's something healing about dough. It doesn't lie. You measure, mix, knead, and wait. If you've done it right, it rises. I stopped waking to the glow of a phone screen at 1 in the morning. I started running again before sunrise, nodding at the same dog walkers who tried and failed to hide their curiosity. The clock in the hall went back to being a clock instead of a judge. 3 weeks after the ambulance lights painted our ceiling, the neighborhood went quiet again. Someone posted the video of that night online, and it bounced around before disappearing, swept, under a digital rug where everything lives forever but nobody mentions it over coffee. The court orders held. Every dollar they'd siphoned got pulled back. The bakery shares reverted. The house stayed mine. Mira said it would have been cheaper, kinder, easier if they'd told the truth months earlier. People rarely choose the easy way when they think they can get away with the hard one, she said, and slid another paper across her desk for me to initial. Sabrina moved away. Phoenix, someone said. A new firm, new clients, a new perfume for a new life. Reed's marriage didn't survive the week. I didn't text congratulations. I didn't text anything. Tomas gave me his final report in a plain envelope. I placed it, with the photos and recordings, in a safe deposit box. Less a trophy than a record. Sometimes it helps to know you weren't imagining smoke when the fire was already burning. The house feels bigger now. Maybe it's just the absence of tension. Maybe it's the simple miracle of not being lied to inside your own walls. The silence is quiet again, not the tight, staged kind that used to roll in ahead of an excuse. When I clean my car, I find coins and receipts and the stub from a coffee I actually drank. Nothing under the seats whispers that my life is a story someone else is writing. One evening, my brother and I sat on the porch while the street turned gold. "You okay, Dad?" he asked, using the old nickname that stuck even after we were grown. "Better than okay," I said, and realized it was true. Not Bex.